And you had moments where you saw it and you felt it and you knew you were on the right track. So, and your vitality would increase. And of course, then you would back up because it was challenging, but you have this sense and feeling you're going in the right direction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the same for me when I followed my aliveness. I had so many challenges when I decided to quit my job. Oh my gosh, I had no money, but there was still something in me and just kept going for it because I felt and knew somewhere deep inside I was on the right track.
Welcome to The Way of the Muse, a podcast for women who want to create richness in every area of their lives, from business and career to lifestyle, relationships, family, purpose, and fulfillment. I'm Gigi Sage.
And I'm Makena Sage. We're a mother-daughter coaching team, and combined, we've spent over 4 decades helping people create their best and most fully expressed lives. If you're ready to step into your bigger dreams with ease, fun, and flow, you're in the right place. Let's get into the episode.
Welcome to episode 5. We are recording this a few months after we recorded our first few episodes because we took a little while to get it all pulled together.
Yeah, so that was back in November in Costa Rica, right, when we started?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
And
we're launching this week.
Yay!
Yeah, which is awesome.
So excited to finally be sharing this with you and bring regular episodes wherever you listen to your podcast. So thank you for listening if this is your first time or if you've been listening to the first few. So today we're going to talk about become the woman you're meant to be and confidently create your biggest dreams. So this is our tagline for the show, and we wanted to just share, where did this come from? So Gigi, you want to tell that story of how we came up with this?
Yeah. So as we started writing the book, which is we're still working on, right? We went out and talked to several of my clients, and a lot of those had been with me for many years, over 10 years. And so what we saw is there was a common theme that emerged from the interviews that we did. And the women said that they felt like they were more like themselves than they had ever been. Yeah. And they also felt like they had really become the woman they were meant to be. And they were living the lives that they had dreamed about, previously. And the other factor that really showed up was that they also had more confidence in themselves and confidence to really go for what they wanted. They had a lot of clarity too.
Yeah. For those of you listening, I don't know if you've ever tuned in this way, but maybe you have. You kind of get this deep down feeling of, am I on the right path in some way? Or am I really in alignment with the life I'm meant to be living? And sometimes it's just this niggling, like, something needs to change. Or sometimes it's like, yes, we get that full body yes kind of feeling. And if you've never tuned into that, maybe it's something you can start to do a little bit now. And so, but we do know from working with women that the more they do really step into the lives that are in alignment for them, and that they have this feeling, I am becoming the woman I'm meant to be. I am living the life I'm meant to live. Yeah. And so we want to just talk a little bit about that today. And how do you step more and more into that version of you? And then how do you get the courage and the confidence to go for your dreams? So in our story episodes, we touched, on a high level on a lot of our stories. And in this episode, we want to go a little deeper into basically how we both began going for our bigger dreams, becoming more of the woman that we were meant to be. And so we're going to do this through a tale of two women, as we're calling it. So Gigi in her story shared that she at first was living kind of on autopilot in her life, and then stepped really onto her path and began to follow her aliveness. But for many of you, you might not know what we mean when we say follow your aliveness. So Gigi, take us back again. Where does this all begin? And how did you start to learn to follow your aliveness?
Yeah. So as I shared in my story, I attended a workshop in 1985. And at that time, I was single. I had 2 small children. I had been on autopilot for years because I was basically just trying to survive, right? I was raising my kids, working, and I had this opportunity come to me to attend a workshop, which, I'd never even really heard of workshops. And when I went to this workshop, the fascinating thing that happened is I sat up in front of the room, and the trainer at that time asked me questions, and simple questions like, what do you want? In that moment, I was stunned because I was like, oh my gosh, I've never really thought about what I wanted. I'm so much just, in my life trying to like I said, survive. And so as I looked out in the room, there were so many curious people just waiting for my answers. And so as I sat there, I started to think about what did I want? And I started to share. And some of the things that I wanted was, I would love to travel. And when I shared this, the people in the room said, oh, she lit up. And what they meant by that is when I talked about it, there became more light in my eyes. And you could even see it in people. I noticed this as I went through the workshop and I observed other people. I got more animated. There was brightness in my eyes. Sometimes when people sat in front of the room and shared what they wanted and, they lit up, their face changed. They got younger. And so people were giving me this feedback. I think I shared at one time, I'd always dreamed about like living on an island and having my children and being married. And again, people said, oh, you light up there. So having this experience and sitting in front of the room was so powerful because the first time I felt like, oh my gosh, I can actually choose what I want to do in this life. I never had even thought about that. And then my other profound thing that happened in this workshop is when I set out and I watched other people and they would share something that was really dear to their heart. And like I said, you would see them, the eyes would get brighter, their face would change sometimes. They would become animated and excited. And the other thing is sometimes you could even feel it in the room, which was profound. Yeah. You could feel a change in the room when people said what was truly honest for them. So I sat out in that room too, and I was so fascinated by it. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought, wow, I would love to do something like this with people, love to work with people this way. So you can imagine when I left there, I was on fire. I felt like I had found the key to the universe. I was excited and happy. And I started to look at life differently. My perspective shifted. And I started to look at it from this lens of, wow, if I can do things that I want to do, how could I travel, right? How could I go to an island? And so that's the way it started for me.
Yeah, I love that story. And I'm curious for people listening, because we've heard this term, what lights you up. At the time when you first heard this, nobody was talking about that,
actually,
right?
the trainer that was leading it, he created it. Yeah.
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 But now it's everywhere. What lights you up? What lights you up? But I feel like people don't really, sometimes we kind of know, right? But what you were getting in that moment was an actual real-time reflection of your lighting up when you talk about this thing. And that, like you're saying, gave you kind of like clues to what was really close to your heart and soul, or what you had aliveness around, right?
Right.
How is that different though? Because I think most of us have seen people, really animated, really lit up, really doing something they love. And we've seen that, we've had that experience. But sometimes you talk about, sometimes people can be smiling and very animated, but they're not actually lighting up. Can you just make that distinction? What's different there?
Yeah, you've seen people who are talking about something and maybe they, like you said, they're smiling, but you doesn't conduct. Somehow you can sense or feel it's not really authentic. We've all had that experience. It's like putting on a mask, right? And basically we all wear a mask, all of us do. But when someone really taps in, first of all, this ended up being my work. I've developed it out over many years, over 37 years, is that we tap into our vitality. So when someone taps into their vitality and what brings them alive, you can see it, you can feel it. what would you say the word?
It's like a
Contagious.
glow, I think.
Contagious. Yeah. And it's
Oh, it's
contagious. Yeah.
contagious. Yeah, it's a glow
Contagious.
that comes from the inside. And like
Yeah.
you said, it's not just a smile or just,
Right.
it comes through the eyes and it comes through their energy. I
Yeah.
think you can really feel the difference.
Yeah.
So you started to learn to measure this basically, right? That was what you learned in those early days. And then to follow the clues of what you were curious about, of what brought you alive. So you mentioned travel and this work, right, around coaching.
Yeah.
Tell us just a little bit more about like how that evolved as you continued.
Well, because I was fascinated about the workshops, I started assisting them. I was like, this is something that I'm super excited about. I had such a profound experience. Let me assist them. And then I started selling them because I was just so on fire. I had my parents come, my friends come, anyone I could tell that I wanted to share this new feeling with everyone. So I really immersed myself also in the environment. And so through that, I started learning more, and I would, find things where I felt alive or things that I was curious about, and I would start to go in that direction. And that's kind of the way I've lived my life ever since then. And so that's the way I started. So I started in the workshops, and I had always dreamed about, like I said, going to an island, right? And there came an opportunity where the leader was leading a workshop on Maui with Gary Crafso, who is a very famous yoga teacher now, has many books out. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my opportunity. So I figured out a way to get myself there. And that became my first, kind of immersive experience in a different kind of workshop. And then I fell in love with Maui. Yeah.
What year was that? Do you remember?
That was 1985. It was 1985.
85.
Yeah.
And so you fell in love with Maui, and then I know that I was born there a couple years later. So obviously you eventually moved. And I know you started also then, like you talked about, leading workshops. And so it sort of became this path of continuing to follow your curiosity and incorporate the different aspects of what you loved. It really became like a way of life for you, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As I got more into personal development, I started reading things. I went to other workshops eventually and started collecting tools, but I started developing my work very early on. And through collaboration with my mentor, there are certain topics that I really resonated with. And so that was one of them, was men and women. I was fascinated by the masculine and feminine and the dynamic and communication between men and women. And so that I followed that. And that's where I developed my first workshops as well.
And then later, like you talked about in your story, your books and everything came really out of, again, these different pieces of the puzzle. And one thing we were discussing before we got on here is that you couldn't have planned the way that all unfolded.
Oh my
right?
gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I look back, I didn't make a plan. We talk about clarity a lot, and that's really, we do that well with people, right? But in my experience, and the way I experienced this, was I found this tool and I really honed it. And I think it's why my work is today. That's what it is, because I was so passionate about it and I saw how to use it. And it's the way I used every aspect of what I've grown and developed has been from that. So there was no plan there. I sit sometimes and think about the pregnant at 18 years old, right? I was the girl pregnant at 18 years old. I could have never imagined this life that I grew. Yeah.
I think that's such a fascinating thing. I mean, many people would maybe say that, but a lot of people kind of follow the path that they think they're going to follow, right?
Yeah.
And this opened up like a new dimension for you, where you began to follow not the path that was laid out for you, not what you thought you should do, but really to follow this energy, this aliveness, and and then design this life really around that. And it led you to all kinds of unique experiences and this work that you do. So I just think that's so fascinating. And how did you get the courage? Because I think a lot of what you did, when I look at your story, I'm like, wow, that was really courageous, right? To just go to Maui and then, move with your kids and start leading these workshops and start doing all these different things. I mean, people weren't doing that back then. Now travel is so, so many people do it. It's so much more, but you were going to Europe early on and leading workshops and taking your whole family. Like, how did you have the courage to do all of that?
It's a little bit my personality. Yeah. So I'm a kind of fly by the seat of your pants girl. That's not always good. So I just go for things. I often don't think about it. It's like I see something and I want it and I just go for it. I've had many people ask me, how do you travel the world alone a lot of your time? I thought, I've never really thought about that before. Women will say, I'm scared to do that. I'm like, I'm not scared at all, So I'm insatiably curious, I think, is one of the things. And my curiosity and my aliveness, it is the thing that I love to follow. I follow that all the time. So that's the way I am. That's not the way everyone is. Yeah, you're a very different type of person, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think there are people probably that are listening. I mean, you and I are so different in so many ways. We have, of course, similarities because we've spent so much time together and we do similar work. But you are very much, like we often talk about, the visionary, the creative, the maybe more impulsive in some ways, right? But you have this dynamicism, and I definitely meet people like that. That's their more natural way. So I think there will be people who listen to this who relate to your approach.
Yeah.
But my approach was very different. My tale of two women was the one that was really in stress and fear, I think, in my kind of teens and early 20s. And then really stepping into the version of myself who was willing to take risks and really pursue my bigger dreams. Very different.
Yeah. And the other part I think I should share is that, I also had a mentor that challenged me and, set up situations where I would go out and take risk. I would do, but I did it, but that was, and maybe that's what I needed. For me, that was exciting. I like adventure, I think. And so I had many instances where I was scared, but because it was like a challenge and set out there for me, I went for it.
Yeah, a little bit like on the edge there. You like that. Go for the not me at all.
Right.
Yeah, I've gotten to grow into more courage because I was very risk averse. And for me, a lot of that came down to, because we went through that dark night of the soul that we both shared about in our episodes, I had a lot of just financial fear because we went through financial ups and downs in that time. And it's also, I think, just the kind of person I am. I think, I came in with a little bit more of maybe a risk averse personality. And so security was very important to me. More predictability was important to me. I liked to know what the plan was, what was going to happen, see, 10 steps ahead. And that was great. It was, in one way a superpower, but I was also in a lot of pain as I've shared about. Yeah. I was really longing for something.
Yeah. So, I mean, you made a huge shift, right? Because that was so much of who you had become, but as you discovered, it's really not who you are completely, right?
That was the interesting thing. So this theme again of becoming the woman you're meant to be, I really thought I knew who I was. I had a fixed idea of my personality, of how I was. I thought I was, as I've shared before, this kind of serious, structured, high achiever, smart, like this. These were the words I used to define myself. And all those things were true. I have those elements or those aspects to myself. But what I've really discovered on my journey as I started to follow my aliveness, so when I saw that I had always had this curiosity around coaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to go in this direction, but I really didn't know how. Then in 2017, as I've shared, I tried and completely failed to start a coaching business. And then for the risk-averse person that I was,
That was tough.
that was devastating.
Yeah, it was really tough.
Yeah, it was like,
Yeah.
then this must not be it,
Because
maybe
there
this
was the
isn't.
evidence, right? I shouldn't take risks.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and again, the financial piece of, well, if I can't make this work financially, I just don't think I can do it. I think I'm going to go back to security for me, which was my marketing business, my marketing career. It was something I knew I could make money at it. I knew I could be successful. And then you really helped me though, to see a different path, to see a way to transition.
Yeah. 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 And then you really did transition. So like you said, we didn't take the leap. You transitioned by really seeing how could you work in your copy business, right? Remember what we did there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important to break down because I touched on it in my story, but I didn't go deeply into it. So I went to you, I remember, or we were talking and I really saw I want to do this coaching thing. And then, but I was like, I've tried before. It didn't work. I don't know how I'm going to do this financially. I don't have time. I'm working full time in my business. I can't, what's going to give here to allow me to start to earn in coaching when I'm fully immersed in my marketing business. And so, do you want to kind of break down a little bit of what you told me to do, or at least what you remember of it?
Yeah. So I think I told you that we needed to see, instead of you working with 4 or 5 clients, which you were doing at that time, is then to see, could you get one client in your copy business? So that gave you the opportunity to scale back and not be working 5 days a week in the copy business. And you could, I think, 2 days a week or something when you found. So you found the client and they basically, go ahead.
Yeah, this seemed impossible to me at the time. Let me say this.
I remember
you were like,
you had tried
scale back from 5 or 6 or however many clients. Sometimes I was working with, 8 or 10 clients to one who would pay you enough on retainer to scale back and only have to work X number of days a week. I was like, that is not going to happen. But basically, you laid it out for me and I was like, okay, well, that would be great. I can at least see that's what I would want. And it was so crazy because within a couple of months, one of my clients that I was doing, copy and marketing work for, I can't even remember how the conversation came about, but they needed more work. And I just said, listen, would you want to do a retainer? And we could structure it this way. And I don't think it covered like my full amount I needed
it was
to
half
make.
of it. We did half.
It was half.
Yeah.
But I could do it in only working 2 days a week. And that gave me enough of a challenge of like, okay, I get to earn through coaching this other part, or I can fill in if I need to here or there with some other copy. And so that gave me enough of a challenge while still taking care of my bases that I didn't feel that financial fear and that security fear. Yeah. So that's what I did.
Other part of it, I said, what was your bare minimum? And I think it was the number that you got. And then I said, okay, let's create a project around coaching, and you have to go for that. You got to go for that. That will then end up making up whatever comes in. You can put it toward your salary. And that's the way we did that. So then you were about
we talk about the project. Instead of really thinking about it as a whole business, you told me create a project, create one coaching package and go out there and start offering it to people. Yeah. And so that's what I did. I created my Momentum and Flow program. It was my very first business coaching program, really integrating the business experience I had at that time and marketing experience with more of the alignment and the aliveness. How do you build something that really fits for you? And so working with women. And I was terrified, but I went out there and started to move in that direction. And I think that's something to talk about with aliveness, because I think sometimes people hear follow your aliveness and they think it's always going to be amazing. It's always going to feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, in those early days, I was scared out of my mind.
Yeah.
I was, stressed. I was like, I do not see how this is going to work.
Yeah.
And there was a while of that before more energy started to kick in, and I started to get confidence as I began really actually getting clients and working with them in the coaching. So what's the distinction there? I'm curious, because I was moving in a direction that was my aliveness, but the day-to-day was not necessarily that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what's your question? What's your question?
I guess what is that distinction there for people, because they hear follow your aliveness and they think, do the things that bring me alive, and it should feel good. I should feel alive all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think the distinction, and this, is you were extremely relieved to be out from behind the computer. And you had moments where you saw it and you felt it and you knew you were on the right track. So, and your vitality would increase. And of course, then you would back up because it was challenging, but you have this sense and feeling you're going in the right direction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the same for me when I followed my aliveness. I had so many challenges when I decided to quit my job. Oh my gosh, I had no money, but there was still something in me and just kept going for it because I felt and knew somewhere deep inside I was on the right track.
Yeah, I wanted to make that distinction because it is about seeing these clues and starting to move in that direction, but the day-to-day isn't always going to be sunshine and rainbows, right? It's because it's out of your comfort zone a lot of the time. It's going to challenge you. It's going to stretch you. But the main thing is that you are moving in a direction, like you said, where you have that deep down feeling, I'm on the right track. I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing. Yeah. So that's what kept me going. And then you really helping me with the transition plan, because unlike, you having more risk tolerance, I needed that step by step by step, or I would have not stuck with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think just supporting you along the way, because you would have doubts and questioning and just keeping you focused there. And, I think for you too, it was such a relief. And I see this with people when you were just doing your copy 2 days a week and you could work on the other parts of the business in your project. That was completely new, because I had watched you for 3 years or something, 4 years wanting to be out of copy. And you could never figure it out. It was always, it was a double bind constantly, because like you said, there's no way I can work less and do what I need to do here. So,
It was such a relief. And I did start to have changes. I started the anxiety became less, not immediately, but it became less and less as time went on. That told me something right away.
Yeah.
And like you said, I started to feel this kind of relief. And even though I was scared, I think this is an interesting point, is that even though I was scared, I felt more
like yourself.
I don't know, like myself. Yeah, really, truly. Yeah. And so the fear became less important, if that makes sense. It became like, okay, I can handle this fear if it means I get to feel this other feeling, which is I'm in alignment. I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing. And, we'll go more into fears and self-doubts and all of that in other episodes, but you helped me so much with that. And for me, it was really also hugely having you there, having a mentor, having a coach to support me. Of course, I think you saw something in me, you believed in me.
Yeah.
And that was huge to just get that reflection when I didn't believe in myself. And then the other side of it was that you pushed me, that you really sometimes just said, you just got to do it. And I trusted you enough to go, okay, I'm going to do it, even though this seems crazy. And even though I don't think it's going to work, and, so on and so forth. And I would have quit 1,000 times if not for that, because I was more risk, I don't want to. So that was really how my journey began, was with this clarity of a direction that brought me alive, something that I had always been curious about. And then really making that step-by-step transition plan. And I think for people listening, it's like every one of you may not need a whole life change or a whole career change or something like that. But if you do happen to be one of those people that you are thinking there's a career change that you're wanting to make, then some of you need to keep your day job, like we often talk about, or maybe you do a part-time job or something, because you need that. Most people need that structure and stability and so on. And it's only occasionally some people or some circumstances where somebody can just go fully out and, quit their job and really go for something. So I think that's important to say. And a lot of times the changes are not necessarily around career either.
Right. And, as we're talking about here, really the woman you're meant to be. I mean, what we saw when we interviewed those women is, their aliveness, and following that is the way they've grown, not only just their careers, but they've grown their families and their relationships. And that's really been the key factor. So for them, in stepping into the life that they really feel is, the life they're meant to be living. And like you said before, that is constantly evolving, because we change as people and we grow. But this one little skill, is so simple and so extremely powerful.
Yeah, I remember one of the stories where the woman really saw, when you first started working with her, she had a very successful career, and she really saw that family was her top value, and that she maybe wasn't fully living in alignment with that at that time. So she didn't change her career, but I think she maybe went into business more with her husband and started creating other projects. And so she developed out beyond just what she had been doing, developed out more in the direction that felt that was where her aliveness really was at that time. So just to give an example, because I think we both stepped into coaching, but that was just the first little piece, right? We continue to follow our aliveness into different aspects that open up different parts of the life we're meant to live. But with her, I just remember that being the story, that she really saw family was where her energy was and her, values were, and she wanted to really create a life that was aligned around that. And she's done that over many, many
Amazing.
years.
And when she partnered, she had a very successful business, a tax consulting business. And she asked me in the first workshop she ever did with me, I really think about going to work with my husband in these projects that he's doing and growing. And so we worked on that, and she sold her tax consultant business. She went into business with her husband. And as you said, when she did more work with me, she saw she really wanted to spend more time with their kids in a way like quality. So they put together these trips they would do every year. They did all while the kids were growing up. And they partnered in their business, and now there are multiple businesses. Serial entrepreneurs. And hugely successful. But like you said, within the context of family being first. It's amazing.
There's so many ways that this can emerge for you. And I think what we want to share is maybe a little practice you could start to do to begin to see, what is it that brings you alive? What is your aliveness? Because we might think we know what we're passionate about, and you might even know some things, but following your aliveness is a little bit different, the way we want to talk about it. So Gigi, what's a way that people can start to track this or pay attention to this for themselves, start to gather these clues?
All you need to do is begin, take a piece of paper and begin to write down when your vitality is increasing or when it's decreasing. So think of it like this. With aliveness, at every moment, your vitality is either increasing or decreasing. When it's increasing is when you're in more of alignment. So you start charting that. You can chart, when I felt like this, I felt so inspired. I was reading this article, I felt very excited. Write that down. And start to make these distinctions once you add a bunch of things on there, and do more of the things that bring you alive. And then with the things that drain your energy, we can talk about those later.
So starting to just pay attention moment by moment, day by day, will be huge in terms of just that awareness, and then bringing more in or following more of those clues of what does bring you alive.
Yeah.
And then just remembering that this is a process and it's an evolution that is really a lifetime, I think,
Yes.
evolution.
Yeah.
And so it's not going to necessarily all change overnight.
Yeah.
But as you start to move more and more in that direction, it's like I talked about, it's maybe like a percentage thing, because back then, maybe I felt alive and inspired and in my energy, whatever percentage that was, 30% of the time or 20% of the time. And now that number is, 80% of the time, let's say. And so, of course, there's still going to be days, or there's still challenges, or there's still things. But over time, through these different things that we're sharing with you in the podcast and that we do in our work, you will start to see the overall percentage of that change. So I think that's a little bit of how that works. Well, thank you all. Anything else, Gigi, you want to share?
No. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. And just take that baby step after you collect some of the things that bring you alive. Take one and start taking action on it. Incorporate it more into your life, because that's where you begin to make the distinctions. Because just when you incorporate something in your life that you feel more alive with, and you do it for a little while, it also makes your perspective shift. And you start to see life differently. You start to see more of what you want and how you want to grow. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you all. We'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah. Thank you, McKenna.
That's our episode for today, but let's not make it the end of our love story. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and think of some women in your life you'd love to share it with. And if you want to learn more about our events and programs, visit wayofthemuse.com. See you next time.